Hello, this is John Feldt. This is the weekly water outlook for the southeast U.S. Well, I thought I'd start off on this briefing by looking at soil moisture conditions. These are the percentile of soil moisture, and note that northern parts of Alabama, large parts of northern Georgia, western parts of the Carolinas are very wet. This was through the 17th, and there's been some more precipitation since then. Also, large parts of Mississippi. But the line over southern parts of Alabama, southeast Georgia, central and western Carolinas is quite a bit drier. And we've been flip-flopping back and forth through the winter months, especially in Alabama and Georgia from the north to the south. I think the patterns in the Carolinas over the central and eastern part of the Carolinas has been very consistent now, with definitely a trend of above normal precipitation over the western parts and drier over the east. So how much precipitation would it take to get us back to normal? I haven't shown this for a long time because we've really made up a lot of ground over the winter months, but there are still some pockets of anywhere up to 3 inches or even up to 6 inches in isolated spots. But what you can see over most of the southeast U.S. is we're pretty much close to normal as far as soil moisture. Again, I want to keep that trend in there over eastern parts of the Carolinas can still use 2 or 3 inches of rain, maybe even a little bit more. And it looks like some of that could come this week. Now, we're getting into summertime, and I wanted to point this out. This is an isolated, very heavy rain event right over Lake Lanier, matter of fact. You can see the area in red here, which is estimated 6 inches or more close to Flowery Branch, where the Atlanta Falcons practice, by the way. And I wanted to point out that if you look at the top image there, that green, you've heard me talk about this many times, this is precipitable water. Precipitable water is a summation of the value of moisture all the way from the Earth's surface all the way up through the atmosphere. And the more you can pump water in all the way through the atmosphere, the wetter it is, the more likely you're going to get very heavy rain. Now, it sort of works the opposite for severe weather. High precipitable water values sometimes inhibit severe weather. You need some dry air in the middle part of the atmosphere. But when I see 1.7 inches, if you can get a trigger in there, you're going to get very heavy rain. And you'll hear me mention this a lot of times in Blue Water Outlook. High precipitable water, watch out for extreme amounts of rain. In this case, it was a fairly small area of high PW, and the rain was somewhat isolated, but you can see it did occur, and there was some very heavy rain in this axis of thunderstorms. Matter of fact, not just here on Lake Lanier, but all the way from northeast Alabama down through the northern part of Georgia. So if we look at the rainfall last week, what we see was, I mentioned to be a fairly quiet week, and I think for large parts of the southeast U.S. it was, with many areas not getting any rain. But there were some pockets of heavy rain with thunderstorms, and those are those areas in yellow near and east of Birmingham, very significant rain. Then those pockets near Atlanta, and then right before this briefing, up into the northwest part of the area as well. So there were pockets of heavy rain over northern Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. Everywhere else, it was indeed a very quiet week, and you can see that with percents of normal. These isolated areas of heavy rain, that's the blue and purple. Everywhere else was the yellows and reds, and that was below normal precipitation for the week. And that's typical also of summertime, late spring, summer. We're starting to get not a real good consistency in coverage where you see pockets of above normal, pockets of below normal. Matter of fact, you can see that in the Carolinas where there were a couple thunderstorms. Those are those areas in blue, but the overall prevailing pattern was below normal precipitation. Here's the drought monitor. Just haven't showed this a whole lot because we've improved quite a bit. There's still a couple areas of drought over eastern parts of North Carolina, a very isolated part towards the border with South Carolina. Everywhere else now, we are not classified in any degree of drought. And with the rainfall early this week, I think it's going to be a while before we have to worry about that. Okay, now the big picture here, I mentioned yesterday that last week's briefing, the jet stream would be pushing north. It did. And just late in the week, it dipped back to the south. And one of the things as we get into summer, we're going to have to be looking at these cores of upper atmospheric energy, the jet stream. This is the current position. You can sort of see it dipping down, and that's why there's a lot of rain in the Midwest. Over our area, we are getting parts of that jet, and that's why there is still some precipitation. So as we get into the summer months, the amount of upper energy is going to be very important. When we get jet streaks or jet energy, we're going to get more enhanced precipitation. If we don't, it's going to have to rely on daily heating or convection, and it's going to be more of the popcorn type thunderstorms that we get in July and August. So here's the forecast this week. Area in blue is early this week. Area in jet stream and yellow is late this week. And except for the Carolinas where that jet stream does dip down, most of the southeast U.S. is going to be remaining south of the jet. And that means after this initial early precipitation, it looks like things will be quieting down, and then maybe later this week over the Carolinas, more enhanced precipitation if that jet does dip down to the south. Looking out 6 to 10 days, looks like not much change, and it's going to be a little bit hard call here, but this is how I read this jet stream in 6 to 10 days. A bowing over the Midwest and a dipping over the southeast. And this dip in the jet stream here very well could be just enough to produce scattered daily thunderstorms, showers and thunderstorms, primarily over the Carolinas, northern parts of Georgia, northern parts of Alabama, Kentucky, and Tennessee. So that's just enough of a dip of a jet stream to perhaps bring some scattered showers and thunderstorms. So the forecast of rainfall over the next 7 days, you can see here, like I said, with that jet dipping south over the Carolinas, the more widespread rain over North and South Carolina, parts of Virginia. Nothing all that impressive. It's generally around an inch, but this looks like it'll be a fairly quiet week over Alabama and most of Georgia, perhaps also over most of Mississippi, with the action well to the north and well to the west. I wanted to point out the 8 to 14 day trends. What we have here on the right are temperature trends, and on the left temperature, on the right rainfall. And what we see here are, with that jet, remember I said it was going to sort of dip down in our area very slightly. I think we will average above normal as far as temperatures, but it's going to be just slightly. The core of warmest temperatures should be well to our west. And it does hint at some scattered precipitation, and that's why you can see that shading of green over our area. And like I said, it's mainly going to be over eastern parts of the southeast U.S., and that's where that jet will be digging down the most. Western parts is going to be getting a little bit more into the drier air. I'm going to be talking a lot about this in my newsletter and different things I put out. One of the things I wanted to mention was it's going to be very important this time of year that we keep the soils somewhat moist, that we just don't shut things off. Last year, you might remember in the Midwest, we sort of shut it off, and then you get this feedback. And I'll be talking about that, but I'm going to be looking at signs for feedback. We don't want a feedback pattern of dry and hot. And because we've come out of the winter months with moist soils, that's very much a very positive factor that we're going to continue to avoid that type of dry feedback, at least into the early summer months. So here's the trends through June 4th, the long-term precipitation pattern. This is just what I said, scattered type precipitation over eastern parts of our area, but the rest of the area looks fairly quiet. I think if I had to say overall over the southeast U.S. after early this week, it looks like generally a fairly quiet pattern with precipitation averaging below normal. That's why it looks like soil moisture, except for this week, that's that blue over the Carolinas. You see generally browns over Mississippi, Alabama, sort of neutral over Georgia, and then dipping into the blues eastern. And that's that trend of soil moisture drying out over western parts of the southeast U.S., sort of holding its own over the middle part. And then as we get into the east, into the Carolinas, perhaps a slight improvement in soil moisture. So the takeaway points from this week's briefing: scattered storms early this week and sort of more scattered through the middle part of the week as well. But the focus will be shifting into the Carolinas and Virginia. And then after this week, it looks like a possibly prolonged period of below normal precipitation, mainly over parts of the western part of the southeast U.S., Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. Hey, thanks for listening to this week's briefing. I will be putting out information throughout the week. I'm going to be putting out an Outlook, I believe, on Wednesday or Thursday, and my newsletter I'm working on as well. If you ever have any questions, feel free to email me. I can be reached at john@bluewateroutlook.com. Again, thanks for listening.